All right, we're going to film our first coding video for this Reversi application. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on getting the development environment set up so that we can continue to build out this whole web application of Reversi. I'm Professor J Patterson. Thanks for tuning in here. All right, so let's see, getting started, this is where we're heading. We're going to set up an architecture that looks like this. We're going to have three different components to our architecture. We're going to have our local computer, we're going to have GitHub, and we're going to have Heroku in the upper right there. On our local computer, we're going to work with the source tree application for managing Git. We're going to do some local development work, and for that, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. We're going to use a Chrome web browser. All of these things are going to be working within the computer, my local computer. In the development environment, the web browser is going to look at the materials that are being stored on my computer, the program, the web server that's delivering the content, the HTML, CSS, JavaScript files. When we deploy it to GitHub, GitHub and Heroku will work together, and then we can turn our web browser to looking towards the cloud and using the URL that's provided by Heroku to do the same work as what we saw happening on our local computer, but when it's out here on Heroku, anyone in the world can use it. Down here, only those people who have access to our local computer, us, have access to it. So it has about several different steps. Let's look at what they're going to be. About 11 of them. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to install Node and NPM on our local machine. All right, so let's take a look at that. What I want to do for that is I want to show you where to go to get that and how we're going to work to achieve that. So stand by. Okay, Node is a software package that runs JavaScript outside of a browser. So it just runs it like a normal program. You can get it from this website, NodeJS.org. This is what I recommend you do if you're working on a Windows computer. You can download it and run it locally. But if you're going to be running on a Mac computer, I recommend you install it with the package manager called Homebrew. That can be found at brew.sh on the internet. These are two different ways of downloading it. Homebrew is going to be available for installing things faster on a Mac, and it's a little bit more consistent than downloading separate packages. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like if we want to install Node and NPM, two different programs we want to install in order to get this running. So let me get a terminal window up. I'm loading a terminal window, and I'm putting it on the screen. All right, so for this, this program is called Terminal in a Mac. There's command line versions that you can run in other environments on other platforms. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is just install those programs. Now I already have Brew installed and I already have these applications installed, and so we're going to see that they're already installed, but for you it will be installed the first time. So on Mac it's going to be brew install node, and we'll let that run for a second. And as it's running, there we go, looks good. So right now I'm running node 16.0.0.0-1 and installed and up to date. That will probably be fine. As time goes on and you watch this video, there might be a newer version, but it'll probably be still compatible. The other program we want to install is NPM, or Node Package Manager. That's going to manage the packages that we're interested in running on our website. And you can see that it looks like I've already got that installed as well. So looks like I'm good to go. You will probably see a different process where there's a download for the first time. All right, so that's our first step. Our first step was to install Node and NPM on our local machine. Now, we said that this work, when we install it on our local machine, we're also going to be running the same system here as we are in Heroku. Fortunately, Heroku already has this stuff installed, or it will install it when it starts our program. All right, so we just did a little setup on our local computer. Now what we want to do is we want to create a new project on GitHub that's going to hold our project that we're working on. So for that, we're going to go over to the GitHub website and we're going to make a new repository. Let's do that. Here's my website. Here's GitHub. I'm already logged in. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to hit the little plus sign and say new repository. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call it Reversi Patterson. For me, you can name it anything you want. It just has to be something that is available. For a description, I'm going to say this is an implementation of the game Reversi on the web. Again, this is up to you how you want to describe it. Now I'm going to make it private so that other people don't have access to my source code. That's something that You can decide if you want your source code public or not. Make sure that you add a README file and that you add a git ignore file. And when you choose git ignore, you're going to want to find a node format. So I'm going to do node. That's going to just help the system know what kind of files to ignore. And then we can choose a license. And for the license, I'm going to choose this new public license 3.0, which means that anyone can use my software if they get it. Of course, it's private. So, all right, I don't need anything for continuous integration. And so I should be able to hit create and everything should pop up fine with an initial git license, with initial license, an initial git ignore file, and an initial readme file. All right, so we set up our repository, all set. Now we want to clone that project onto our local computer. And for this, we're going to need to use some kind of a Git program. You can use Git from the command line. You can use Git from a GUI. I'm going to use the program SourceTree. And SourceTree, regardless of what you're using, you're going to need to know where on your local computer you're going to be storing your projects. And so for me, I'm going to store that in a directory that I store all of my Git repositories. So let me get SourceTree up and running, and then we'll come back and take a look at that. All right, I've got SourceTree running, and what I need to do now is I need to create a new clone from a URL. So I'm going to get a URL from GitHub, and I'm going to clone that location onto my local hard drive. So let's take a look at how to do that. We'll select clone from a repository. Now we need to go out and get that URL from GitHub. So back to GitHub. And we're looking up here in this green button where it says code, and I want to clone, and I'm going to use SSH. You're probably going to be best served by using HTTPS. SSH requires you to set up a password connection between your local computer and GitHub. So I'll start with SSH. You'll probably have better luck with HTTPS. I hit the copy button. It's in my clipboard. Come back here and I'll put that in there. I'll paste it and hit tab, and it'll give me a recommended name of my repository or folder name, and it'll give me a recommended location. Now I don't actually want this as my location, so I'm going to pick the location that I do want. I can either hit the browse button here, or I happen to know where I want it, so I'm just going to go ahead and type it in directly. This is a location on my local hard drive where the files at this remote location are going to be, and this is going to be the name of the repository. Go ahead and hit clone, and SourceTree will download those files and put them on my local computer. And then when I look at the history here, I should see one check-in. And this is the check-in that occurred when I initially created the project on GitHub. And you can see that now it's been mirrored on my local hard drive because SourceTree works by looking at your local hard drive. And you can see that there are 3 files that were associated with this first commit. I have first commit highlighted, and these are the 3 files. A green plus means they were added for the first time. All right, great. So we just cloned that project to our local computer. And let's take a look to see that those files are there. Let me pull up File Explorer so that we can take a look at that. All right, and where I put it on my computer was here and here. And so you can see that there are 2 files. The git ignore file is actually a hidden file, but they're present. This is my local computer. This is my path name. SourceTree brought it down for me from the cloud. All right, next, that's what we just did. We just got our information from SourceTree. Our SourceTree got the information from our GitHub repository. Now we're going to use npm to set up the files on our local computer that we need in order to make our project work both on our local computer and our remote Heroku instance. npm is the program that we downloaded in stage 1 of this tutorial. So now we're going to go into the command line on our local computer and run a few install commands. All right, so I'm going to go to a terminal, and I'm going to go to that location where I stored stuff. So I'm going to go into my Git directory and Patterson. I'm going to take a look at that. And so I've got 2 files in there, and now I need to run a couple commands in order to initialize my directory. And first of all, let's just make sure that we installed everything okay. So if my node was installed okay, I should be able to run node -- version, and I'll see some kind of response. So again, I'm running version 16, and I should be able to run npm -- version. And I should get, looks like 7.1, 10.0. Great. The main thing is that it responded. So that was good. All right, so now what I need to do is I need to initialize this directory so that it will work as a node program. And so to do that, I'm going to type npm init, and it's going to ask me a few questions. This utility will walk you through creating a package.json file, another file for our directory. Covers only the most common items and tries to guess some sensible defaults. Okay, and some help options as well. So my package name, whatever's in parentheses is the default option if you just hit return. So I'm just going to hit return and take Reversi Patterson as my package name. That's fine. What version? Well, this is up to me. I'm at version 1.0. I guess 1.0 kind of suggests that it's ready for prime time. So I'm actually going to say 0.0.1. This is just a release number. It doesn't impact anything except your communication to the rest of the world about how stable your code is. Description, this is a web version of the game Reversi. Again, just a description. The entry point, by default, it wants to say index.js, but we're actually going to change this, and we're going to use a file called server.js, and that's going to have all of the logic of our game and our web server, called server.js. We're not going to use a test command, so we'll just hit return there. The repository should be set. It should be set based on what you cloned already, so that's good to go. Keywords, whatever keywords you want to put in there. And whatever information you want to put down about who you are as an author. And best known practice is to spell your name right. There you go. License should probably match what you did on GitHub. That's GPL version 3. That means that anyone can use it if they can get it. Oh, it didn't like it. Let's see. What does it want? Okay, you got to type it in exactly right. How's that? Great. Then what it's going to do is it's going to output the file that the contents of what package.json, this is a file, it's put in your local hard drive, the contents of what's going to be in there. It's a particular format that helps communicate details about your project. It's a format called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Probably okay. I'm going to hit return, take the default yes. And then if I look in this directory, you can see that that package.json file is present. That has initialized my directory, so I'm ready to start running a node program. Okay, so let's see. Actually, there's one more file that we need to install. Again, where we're putting these is we're putting these on our local file system. So let's go back and install a couple more things. So we initialized this directory with the npm init command, and now what we also want to do is we want to install 2 libraries that we're going to use. And so we'll do that by running npm install, and the first one we're going to install is a package called socket.io, and that's going to enable us to do real-time communication with our web server. And we're going to end that with a -- save so that it will update our package.json file so that Heroku will know that it also needs to install this. I have a little pop-up here, which is a firewall, but you probably won't have that. Take a second and download that package and anything else that's required. And then I'm going to install a second one, and the second one is called node.static, and that's going to enable our program to work like a web server. And again, -- save at the end so that the install sticks. All right, looks good. A little bit of a warning there about some low severity security vulnerabilities. This isn't a high security application, so we're fine. And if I look at the files that are here now, you can see there's a new folder directory called node_modules. And if I look at that, you'll see that there's actually a bunch of files that have been installed in this directory to help me understand, to help the to help the program eventually run. All right. Next step, that was installing npm init and the 2 software libraries we needed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a file called a proc file with a capital P. These are the instructions. This file is going to contain the instructions that tells Heroku how we want our program to be run. So this is just a manual exercise, and we can do this in any text editor. What I'm going to use is I'm going to use Visual Studio Code in order to edit this. That's the first time I've used Visual Studio Code for a project, but my former students have convinced me it's worth giving it a shot. So let's give it a shot. This is a file we're going to put on our local system. This is Visual Studio Code, and we need to add a new file. So I'm going to go into the file browser. I'm going to open up the folder that we've been putting our information in. That's not it. Looks close, but it's not the one I'm working on. Here we go. Here's my directory. I'm going to go ahead and open that up so that my file explorer will show me the files that are over here that are currently in my directory. And I want to add a new file, so I'm going to click here and I'm going to call the file with capital Procfile. You can create that file any way you want. I'm going to do it within Visual Studio Code. All right, in the body of the proc file, I need the following. I need to type web : I need to type web : space node space server.js. You may notice that this file, this server.js, is referencing a file that we already referenced again. This is telling Heroku how to launch our program. So I'm going to save that file, and then we're good to go on that step. Great. Now we need to create a new application on Heroku. All right, our new application on Heroku is where our public version of our game is going to be. So to do that, we'll go to our web browser and we will open up the Heroku website. Come over here and I'll click New. I'm going to create a new application, and this is where we're going to link it into our GitHub repository. So I'm going to call it the same name, call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call it the same name as my GitHub repository so I can keep everything sane and consistent. I'm going to create the application, and what I need to do now is connect it to GitHub. So I'm going to connect to GitHub by choosing my repository. I've already set up that connection, and I'm going to type in what I'm looking for. Again, need to learn how to type my name. Search. There it is. I'm going to connect my Heroku application to my GitHub repository, and let's see. We're using main as the branch that we're working on, and I want to enable automatic deployment. And that's going to mean that whenever I upload code to GitHub, Heroku will automatically run the new code. Great. Hit that automatically, and there's no application yet in GitHub. We haven't synced our local computer to GitHub, so nothing should happen yet. But we'll just leave that here for the time being. All right. Oops, wrong file. So we just created a new application on Heroku. Now, and then we linked the app on Heroku to the GitHub repo. So when we did that, we made a connection between GitHub and Heroku. Now we want to edit server.js on our local machine so that it can act as a web server, so that when a client web browser asks our computer for a particular file, like index.html or whatever it is, we are going to deliver that back to the client, just like any web server might do. This is going to be has a little bit of complexity to it, so we're going to start editing server.js. We're going to be editing this on our local computer, and so I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to do that. All right, don't need welcome, don't need that. I'm going to come over here and create a new file. We're going to call it server.js, and we've got a bunch of different pieces that we need to put in here. And so we're going to I'm going to use some comments to help us understand what's happening. So let's start by just creating a little comment field here just to block it off. And I'm going to say, we're going to say set up the static file server. This means set up the part of our program that's just going to return files that are on our hard drive. Oops. There we go, line that up. All right, and to do that, we are going to need to load that library that we previously installed. So I'm going to create a new variable called static, and I'm going to set that equal to the library that we are going to need to require, open parenthesis, single quote, node-static. This is the library that we previously required. I'm going to end it with a semicolon, and that's going to allow our program to serve files from the file system. Now I'm going to set up the HTTP server so that not only are we allowed to serve the files, but we have a mechanism to actually do that. And that's actually the library. And so I'm just like we did with static, I'm going to create a variable called HTTP, and I'm going to require the HTTP library. Now you'll notice we're not using HTTPS. In order to run HTTPS on Heroku, that is a premium feature. You need to pay to be able to do that. You also need to do some cryptography work to download cryptographic tokens to secure that connection. Again, this is not a high security application. It's not even an application that has particularly sensitive information. So to reduce complexity, we're just going to work with HTTPS for this application. That creates a server that enables us to get our information from the file system. And now we're going to make it work with Heroku. There's a little bit of complexity here. And what we're going to do is when our program runs, we're going to assume that we are running on Heroku. That's not always going to be the case. Sometimes we're running on our local computer. And we're going to do the following things. We're going to try and figure out what port our web server is running on. And we're going to ask for the global variable process.env, capital port, capitalization matters. So process.env-port, port is capital. If we are running on Heroku, then this will get a value. Likewise, we're going to set up our directory where we're going to store our information. We're going to put that in a file by setting it equal to __, two underscores, dir name as recommended, plus single quote back / public. That's naming a directory on Heroku where we're going to store our files. Now we're going to check to see if maybe we're not actually running on Heroku. We'll see if we aren't on Heroku, then we need to adjust our port and directory. And we're going to do that by checking to see whether port is set. So to do that, we're going to check a couple things. We're going to use the if statement, lowercase if. We're going to two parentheses. We're going to say if type of port double equals single quote undefined. So if port hasn't been defined or port triple equals null. So if that's the case, it means that this program is running on our local computer and we need to reset those variables. And so in particular, we're going to set port equal to 8080. That means that when we're running our server on our local computer, it'll be on port 8080. And our directory is going to be equal to single quote dot / public, single quote. And let me fix the indentation there. There we go. So that'll clean up whatever we've got going on, whether we're running on Heroku or we're running on our local machine. Now what we're going to do is set up our static file web server to deliver files from the file system, from our hard drive. To do that, we're going to create our file system. We're going to say let that be equal to a new static server, static.server, and we're going to base it in the directory variable that we just set up. So we're going to get our files from that particular directory where we were. All right, good. Is that all we need? Not quite. We're going to need one more little bit. We've got a file server. Now we need to wire all the pieces together. We need to make the web server available. We need to create our application. So we need to take our static server, our HTTP server, our file server, and wire them all together. So we'll do that by creating a variable called app. That's going to be our application. And we are going to start with our server, HTTP, and we're going to create a server. That server is going to, every time someone asks for content from our server, we're going to run a function, and we're going to receive in that function our request, and we're going to return our response. And what we're going to do in there is we are going to do request add listener, and what we are going to add to that is the string end, followed by a function which is going to serve the file.serve, the request and the response. All right, and then the last, let's see. Clean this up here. All right, so we have our function, we have our request. Let's indent that just for cleanness. The indentations are just for human readability, so we can keep track of where all these things are lining up. There we go. And then on to the end of the request, we need to say resume so that the web server will keep running. Great. And then at the very end of our app command, we need to launch it, and we're going to say listen on port. And then if everything's working okay, we just want to write something out so that we know it's working okay. So we'll say console.log single quote, the server is running. Now in JavaScript, you can use single quotes or double quotes, but we're just going to use single quotes because it's more common, and we're just going to try and be consistent. All right, so let's save that file. And I think that's everything we need for server.js. Let's just go check out, make sure we're doing okay with our, that was server.js. All right, and so now if we don't know that server.js works yet, let's check that out before we go any further. So I'm going to go to my terminal window. I'm going to see what's here. There's my server.js. If everything works okay, I should be able to type node server.js, and I shouldn't get any errors. Let's see. Great, I have a firewall, so that asks me if I wanted to accept incoming connections. I do. Great, my server is running. That's super. Now there's nothing to deliver, so I need to go back here, and now we need to create an index.html file so that someone who hits our web server, there's something to give back to them. All right, this is also going to go in our local file system next to server.js, but it's going to need to go into a directory called public because that's what we put in our server.js file. So I'm going to stop this by hitting Control-C. I'm going to look at what I've got here, and I'm going to make a new directory called public. There we go. And if I look in my file browser, this is just the System Explorer that shows the version of what I just showed. I could have done new folder here. I did it from the command line. And into public, we're going to put a file called index.html. I'm going to do that from Visual Studio Code. All right, I'm over here. Let's see, in public, I want to add a new file, and it's going to be called index.html. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Bootstrap, and I'm going to get the default template starter file for that. So let's come over here. Let's go to Get Bootstrap. Let's get started. Let's quick start. There's my starter template. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go back here to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to paste it. And I'm just going to get rid of option 2. Just use, oops. Save it. All right. If I go back to my file browser, you can see that that showed up now. So I've got my index.html file. I just put it right there in my file system. The next step is to commit it to my local repository and then deploy it to GitHub with SourceTree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my files that are here now. I'm going to use SourceTree and I'm going to commit them to my repository. I'm going to put a dot on my history. Then I'm going to push it to GitHub. GitHub will then register that I have the files there. It will inform Heroku that there is a new update. Heroku will load that code, and then if everything works okay, I should be able to use my browser in order to verify that it's running on Heroku. All right, so let's see if we can do that. I'm going to shift gears to SourceTree now. Here's my source tree. You can see that as soon as it refreshes, there's a new proposed node here, all my uncommitted changes. And if I load this up, I can see what's new. I can see that down here I have a variety of different files that have been added to my environment. These are all question marks because they're new files. They're not changes. And so what I need to do is I need to stage the ones that are important. Well, package and package lock are both important. That's for telling Heroku what libraries we need. Procfile is important because that tells Heroku how to run our application. Server.js is important because that's the code we're going to be running. And public/index.html is important because that's the website. .ds_store is not important. That's a file that Macintosh creates in your directory whenever you use Finder to look at a directory. And so I'm actually going to add that to my ignore list. I'm going to hit ignore. I'm going to say just ignore that exact file name for this repository only. Hit OK. And that will cause the files that I'm ignoring to change. You can see that what's happened is when I select git ignore it, it adds .ds_store. So I need to commit that as well. These files are all staged, ready to be committed to my local repository. And now I'm going to hit commit. I'm going to create a new node on my timeline for this repository. And I'll just put in a note here, setting up the static file server for Heroku and further development. I'm going to hit commit. I have not changed anything yet with respect to my remote repository. You can actually see origin here is GitHub. Let me see if I can rename that. Let's see, repository, repository settings, remote origin. I want to edit it and I want to rename it so it's called GitHub so we know what we're looking at. GitHub. Okay. And then I want to fetch from all remotes. All right, now you can see the difference. You can see that GitHub only has my repository up to this point in my history. Locally, I have some additional information that I've committed, but I haven't pushed to GitHub. I would like GitHub to know about this additional code so that it will tell Heroku to update the application. So even after I've committed, I'm now going to push. I'm going to push to GitHub. What am I going to push? My main branch. Hit OK. I can look at the output if I want to make sure everything goes OK. Completed successfully. That's great. All right, and if everything did work okay, I should be able to come over to my GitHub view. Here's GitHub. If I refresh this page on my website, I can see that all the files that I committed are now on GitHub. If I go to Heroku, I should now be able to, it should have deployed. It's hard to know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this next step, which is to verify that it's working in my web browser. So Heroku offers a quick link to that. That's open app. Let's see if it works. Oh, hello world. It's working really well. Here's my link, reversi.pattersonheroku.app.com. I just want to double check that everything's working okay. So I'm going to do a quick change, commit, and redeploy. Let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's change hello world. And let's say, this is Reversi about to change the world. I'm going to save that file. And now I'm going to go back to source tree. I'm going to select uncommitted changes. See, main and GitHub now have the same code. I have a new file change. You can see green is what changed. I'm going to stage that. I'm going to commit it with a little note. Said verify I understand what's happening. I'm going to commit that. That's going to change the history on my local computer. I'm now going to push that so GitHub is up to date. Make sure I send it my main branch. Hit OK. Everything completed successfully. And if I come here, give it a second for Heroku to update. It takes a second for the information to flow from GitHub to Heroku, but once it does, I should be able to hit refresh. I should be able to hit refresh. Give it 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hit refresh. There we go. Oh, I changed the title. I didn't change the content. I was moving too fast. Let's go back and fix it. All right, I'm going to take the title and I'm going to change that here too as well. Save that. Try again. Go back to source tree. Select my uncommitted changes. Select index. I changed the proper place in the body. Commit it. Change the body. Commit. And push to GitHub and main. Good to go. Go back to Heroku. Give it 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That wasn't quite enough. Let me just make sure that my caches are cleared. So I'm going to open up inspect and then empty cache and hard reload. Is it just taking time or is there a bug? There we go. Great. So we changed it. So that was the web browser verifying on server.js. What I didn't show is running on the local environment. Let me show you that too. Show the web browser connecting to our local environment. So to do that, we need to go to our server, go to our terminal, and we run node on server.js. No errors there. We go back to our browser, and instead of looking here on Heroku, we open up a new window to localhost :8080 and index.html, got to spell it right. And this is now being served from my local computer. All right, so we have local computer and Heroku. Great. So that's it. That's setting up our development environment. That's going to give us a good place to start from so that as we develop the rest of our application, we're ready to go and we have a full-featured ability to move code, check it out locally, enable the rest of the world to see it on Heroku as well. Thank you very much for your attention.